My name's Al Serrato. I served in the U.S. Army, starting as a Private E1, and went through Officer Candidate School, where I graduated as a second lieutenant, commissioned officer, infantry. From there, I went to Panama Canal for specialized jungle warfare training. And then when I got into Vietnam, I led ambushes with the 25th Infantry Division, 1st of the 5th MAC in Cu Chi. I did that for about 6 months, and then thereafter I volunteered as a I-Corps advisor, MAC-V advisor in I-Corps, leading popular forces, which is like Vietnamese National Guard, in ambushes. In my own opinion, I would say yes, because coming from a civilian background where there was really nothing special, I was low-key student, and then suddenly thrown into a war theater where there was a lot of bloodshed. You might ask yourself, how can you really be prepared? But I turned from a fairly mild-mannered person into a real gung-ho person. And then I was sent to Panama Canal jungle warfare training, where I got this particular badge here, jungle warfare expert. So I was trained to survive and to lead others in combat. Of course, the big issue is, though you may be adequately trained, you're not necessarily emotionally trained for the horror of war. My first time in combat was similar to Apocalypse Now. Uh, as soon as the helicopter dropped me off, the area that the landing zone had been heavily hit by the enemy, and you saw a lot of burned brush, looked like a forest fire. It's actually, they were taking a lot of mortar rounds, which uh, turned all the brush on fire. And so as I'm walking up the hill, which is looking like hell on Earth, all the smoke rising, et cetera, the first thing I saw was a young soldier, 19, 20 years old, in a kind of a hypnotic state, sharpening butcher knives. He had about 6 or 7 butcher knives. And I asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm getting ready for the next ambush. And I said, why are you using butcher knives? Butcher knives was not something I was trained to fight with. He says, take a look at my necklace. So he showed me a necklace he'd made of Viet Cong ears. And that's when I had my first taste of the horror of war, that for people to descend spiritually, mentally, emotionally, where taking someone's ears of someone that you've killed, it's not a big deal for them. So they have so desensitized their emotions that this is to them normal. For me, it was not normal. Prior to my going out in the field as a combat infantry officer, I was executive officer for my unit, and part of my duties were to visit the wounded. So a dust-off had just occurred, and wounded were being brought into the infirmary, which is a really large tent that had maybe 20, 30 patients. And I was walking around looking for the people that were in our platoon, so I could ask them if they might need assistance in my contacting their family, sending them letters, et cetera, et cetera. And so finally, I got to the very end where one of the soldiers was from my unit, and I looked at him laying in bed, and the bed was sopped in blood, and he'd lost 2 arms and a leg. And so it was, what do you tell someone like that? How are you? how are you doing? Seems so inadequate, you know. So I said, hello. He says, hello, sir. Thank you for visiting me. And I said, can you excuse me for a moment? So I ran outside and threw up, and I didn't go back. And so the next day, in the evening, I went to go visit him, and I walked up to the end, and I talked to him for maybe a few more seconds, and recognizing that with 2 arms and a leg missing, he'll never be the person that he was before. I felt so bad for him, his life, his future. And so I said, can you excuse me for a moment? I ran outside and I threw up again. And it wasn't until the 3rd time, 3 nights in a row, that I was finally able to go in there and do what I was supposed to do. And that was ask him whatever assistance I could provide, contact his family, write letters on his behalf, which I did. But who can ever be prepared to see that type of injury, you know, to another human being, to your body, done by the acts of war? There's no training, you know, that will prepare you for it. When I adjusted to life, as I was processing myself to adjusting towards life, the first place that I turned myself into was the VA, because at the end of 11 months of constant combat environments, where I was no longer the person I was before, I changed from naive, well-meaning, good-hearted person into a very tough, desensitized person, which I needed to become in order to protect myself emotionally, as well as to continue to lead people in combat. I went to the VA, and I was in horrible shape, and the VA responded with, "Get over it. You know, everybody goes through this. There's nothing wrong with you." And so I left the VA absolutely outraged. I needed help. I needed assistance, medication, something, because I just didn't feel well. And this is how they treated a returning veteran, was just kicked to the curb. And shortly thereafter, I found myself in the hospital for 3 days because of the severity of the emotional trauma that I had experienced. And the doctors said, we can't find anything wrong with you, but we know there's something wrong with you. And this is before post-traumatic stress disorder became the coinage, you know, that people would use for people who have been traumatized, you know, by combat. And shortly after that, for approximately 6 months, I wasn't able to work. I was suffering from chronic fatigue. I'd get up in the morning tired. I'd go to bed tired, sleepy. I had no motivation to do anything except just lay in bed and just try to rest and recuperate. And I felt lousy because I felt that I should be earning a living. I should be bringing home the bacon, taking care of my family, and I couldn't do any of that. So it took me a couple of years until I was able to work myself out, you know, from that kind of a situation, and I withdrew. I had almost no friends. I just pretty much stayed in my house, which are the classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, where you withdraw from a society that doesn't understand you anymore, and you don't want to be with other soldier types because you don't want to be reminded of the episodes of chaos and trauma that you suffered.